Hi, this is Victoria Sparks. I'm the band and life skills teacher. And this is part 2, so chapters 4 through 7 of Bailey School Kids, The Abominable Snowman Doesn't Roast Marshmallows. And in the beginning of the book, the Bailey School Kids were walking along, coming home from school, and they saw a fire, and they found this guy roasting marshmallows. His name is Savage. So, we'll pick up on chapter 4, and the title of chapter 4 is Squash. A pickup truck with a flatbed trailer was parked nearby under a drooping spruce tree. Nestled in the corner of the vacant lot beyond the tree, Mr. Savage had built a snow house that looked like an igloo. In front of the igloo were snow chairs, a snow table, and what even looked like a snow bed. Mr. Savage reached out, causing Melody and Liza to jump back. He ignored the kids and grabbed a huge bag of marshmallows. "Hey," Eddie said, "those are mega marshmallows. They're the best marshmallows ever." If there's one thing Eddie was an expert on, it was sweets. The man grunted as he sat down. He plucked 3 more marshmallows in his mouth. So you can see there's a picture of the ice chair and the ice table. So he plugged 3 more marshmallows from the bag and jabbed them onto the end of his stick. "Do you live there?" Howie asked, forgetting all about leaving. He was just too curious. Besides, Mr. Savage didn't look necessarily as scary when he wasn't standing. "I travel, do jobs," Mr. Savage said, turning the sticks so the marshmallows roasted an even brown. "Looking for cousins," he said. "Does your cousin live near Bailey City?" Melody asked politely. Mr. Savage nodded his shaggy head. "He sent postcards from here. So I visit, maybe live here too." "Live here," Liza said with a shaky voice. Mr. Savage was slowly pulling the 3 marshmallows from the stick and plopped them into his mouth all at once. While he chewed, he jammed 3 more marshmallows and held them over the flames. When he finally swallowed, Mr. Savage turned to look at Liza straight in the eyes. "Cousin said nice mountain here," Mr. Savage told her. "Good food, fresh meat." Eddie didn't care about Mr. Savage's cousins. Eddie wanted one of the marshmallows, and he wanted it bad. "You should let the marshmallows catch fire," Eddie suggested. "Then you can watch them burn. When you blow them out, they're black. I like them when they're crunchy like that." Mr. Savage grunted, and Liza started to feel less scared. In fact, she felt a bit sorry for him. It was cold. The snow was falling even faster, and all he had for dinner was roasted marshmallows. A cold wind whistled through the spruce tree branches and made her shiver. Maybe the man needed a warm place to spend the night. "You know," Liza said softly, "my church is just down the street. They have a warm bed you could sleep in. You could get in out of the snow." For the first time, Mr. Savage smiled. His huge pointy teeth gleamed in the firelight, and his eyes glowed red. "Snow. Me like snow." "Okay then, maybe we could help you find your cousin," Melody suggested. "You could stay with him. What's his name?" The man slowly looked from kid to kid. "Squash," he finally said. "His name is Squash." Then he roared so loudly, Melody couldn't help but scream, "Run!" So there's a picture of Mr. Savage. Chapter 5, Nutcase. The kids didn't stop running until they were inside Howie's house, with the door locked. "Why did you run?" Eddie asked, once he caught his breath. "I didn't even get a single roasted marshmallow." "That guy was scary," Melody admitted. She took off her wet boots and left them by the door in Howie's kitchen. Howie grabbed packets of hot chocolate from the cabinet and turned on the hot water faucet. "It seems like he really likes living outside." Liza grabbed a mug and looked out the window. "I hope he'll be okay. What if he freezes to death out there?" Eddie ripped open a packet of hot chocolate. Brown powder exploded all over the counter. Eddie scooped some of it into his hand and sniffed before licking his hand clean. Only some kind of nutty snowman would want to sleep outside in this weather. Melody nodded. You're right. We never should have gone near him. But not because he's crazy. You're crazy, and we hang around you, Eddie said, before looking at the rest of the chocolate powder off the counter. Melody gave Eddie a warning look. Howie stepped between them, handing Melody a cup of steaming hot chocolate from the microwave. It's not because he's crazy. If it's not because he's crazy, then why? Howie asked. Didn't you hear what he said? Melody asked. He's looking for his cousin. She blew on her hot chocolate and stared at her friends with big brown eyes. Who cares? Eddie said. My grandmother makes me visit my cousins every summer. It's boring, but not against the law. Eddie's a point. Lots of people visit relatives, Liza agreed. She sat down at the kitchen table and stirred her hot chocolate. When Howie brought out a bag of marshmallows, Eddie grabbed a handful and plopped them into his mug. His cup overflowed with chocolate drink and white foam. Then he stuffed his mouth with more marshmallows. These mega marshmallows are the best, Eddie said, as white chunks dribbled out of the corners of his mouth. Melody shook her head at Eddie. I guess more than one monster around here likes marshmallows. What are you talking about, Howie said. What monster? Eddie stuffed even more marshmallows into his mouth, and he looked like a crazy chipmunk. Eddie, of course, Melody said, but I'm also talking about Mr. Savage. What? Howie and Eddie said together. Only Eddie's mouth was so full it sounded more like bleh. And when Eddie opened his mouth, he accidentally spit marshmallows all over the counter. So there's a picture of Eddie stuffing his mouth with marshmallows and the rest of them drinking hot chocolate. Yum. Liza ducked to avoid getting hit by flying marshmallow chunks. Melody picked up a bit of marshmallows off her shoulder and wrinkled her nose. Mr. Savage said his cousin's name was Squash, Melody told her friends. Liza gasped. That's right. Don't you guys remember meeting Mr. Squash? Eddie looked at Howie and shrugged. Both boys had blank looks on their faces. Is he the guy who stocks the vegetables at Turner's Market? The one with the green hair? Eddie asked. Melody shook her head and glared at Eddie. I can't believe you don't remember. Liza's face turned pale. Squash dancing? She blurted out. Mr. Squash taught us how to square dance on the trip to Ruby Mountain. Eddie spit out his hot chocolate. Just as he remembered Mr. Squash. Thanks a lot, Eddie said. I tried to forget all about square dancing. Everyone knew that the last thing Eddie liked was dancing. Mr. Squash was their square dancing teacher, and had been so tall that his head had nearly touched the ceiling of the picnic shelter. He had a long beard, and the hair on his head curled over his collar. But the strangest thing about him was the pair of big feet enough to stomp a tree into splinters. The kids had all been convinced that he was the legendary Bigfoot. Wait a minute, Howie said, holding up his hands to stop his friends from talking. We never proved that Mr. Squash was Bigfoot. We never proved he wasn't either, Melody said. And now Mr. Savage is saying they're cousins. And if Mr. Savage is Bigfoot's cousin, Liza said with a shaky voice, that could only mean one thing. Mr. Savage, Melody said with a nod, is the Abominable Snowman. So there's a picture of Mr. Squash. Chapter 6, Winter Carnival. Eddie laughed so hard, more marshmallows went flying across the room. Even Howie smiled. Your brains must have turned into mega marshmallow fluff, Eddie said. The Abominable Snowman doesn't roast marshmallows. Liza didn't laugh. Neither did Melody. This is serious, Melody said. But Eddie didn't listen. He gulped down the rest of his hot chocolate and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. I've had enough talk about this crazy guy, Eddie said. We should get ready for the Winter Frost Carnival, Howie agreed. Eddie rubbed his hands together. Now you're talking. Let's get started building snow monsters for the ice sculpture contest. No, Liza snapped. We are making an ice princess castle. We could enter the human dog sled race instead of the ice sculpting contest, Melody said. to stop Liza and Eddie from arguing. They have an elementary division this year. I bet we could win first place if we practiced. Liza's eyes lit up. First place is a free ski weekend at the Golden Eagle Ski Lodge. The kids threw their soggy coats, boots, and hats and gloves back on. We'll use my old sled, Howie said. He grabbed some rope from his garage and hooked it up to the front of the orange sled. Eddie put his back to the wind and told his friends, Liza is the lightest, so she should sit on the sled and everyone else can pull her. Works for me, Liza said, hopping in Howie's sled. I'm the strongest, so I'll be in front, Eddie said. You're not any stronger than me, Melody snapped. Howie held up his snow-covered gloves. It doesn't matter who's first. We're just practicing. All right, let's go, team, Eddie said. From the front of the line, Melody, Howie, and Eddie pulled, but nothing happened. What have you been eating lately, Liza? Melody asked. Bricks? Let's try it again, Howie suggested. This time, pull together on 3. 1, 2, 3! The kids pulled as hard as they could. The runners dug into the deep snow. The sled creaked and shuddered, but very slowly it started to move. At first, just by inches, then a foot, and then the sled began to glide more easily through the snow. You're doing it, Liza screamed. Keep it up. It was tough going from Melody, Howie, and Eddie in their boots, but they finally managed to get Liza moving pretty fast. Don't go out in the street, Howie yelled when they got to the end of his yard. Eddie turned quickly, and so did Melody and Howie. Unfortunately, the sled didn't. Liza and the sled flew into a huge snowdrift at the end of Howie's driveway. Only the back of the sled and Liza's boots were stuck out of the snow. Eddie laughed, but Melody pulled Liza out of the snowdrift. Are you okay? Melody asked. You look like the Abominable Snowman. She looked more like something from the frozen food section at the grocery store to me, Eddie teased. Liza sat on the ground for a few minutes, feeling like a petrified monster. She shivered and knocked snow off her neck. Oh no, she exclaimed. I just remembered that Mr. Savage said Bailey City was full of food, including fresh meat. You don't think he was talking about us, do you? Melody gasped. You're right. What else would a snow monster eat? Wait a minute, Howie said. Even if Mr. Savage is the Abominable Snowman, he wouldn't stay in Bailey City for long because there isn't enough snow. Are you sure? Melody asked, looking around their neighborhood. So there's a picture of Eddie and Melody and Howie pulling Liza on the sled. Snowdrifts covered every yard, and even more snow was falling. In the distance, Ruby Mountain stood tall and white against the gray sky. I think the Abominable Snowman has moved to Bailey City, and he's brought winter with him. That can't be right, Howie gasped. A little snow doesn't mean anything, Eddie added. Then I guess we'll have to prove it, Melody said, before Bailey City becomes the winter feeding ground of the Abominable Snowman. That's the end of Chapter 6. So, we'll just have to see what happens in the next chapters.